Dear children, the next topic is the Lahore session of the Indian National Congress. In December 1929, under the presidency of Jawaharlal Nehru, the Lahore Congress formalized the demand for Purna Swaraj or complete independence for India. It was declared that 26 January 1930 would be celebrated as the Independence Day. In this picture, you can see Jawaharlal Nehru addressing the gathering at the Lahore session of the Indian National Congress. The Salt March and the Civil Disobedience Movement. Mahatma Gandhi found in salt a powerful symbol that could unite the nation. On 31st January 1930, he sent a letter to Viceroy Irwin stating 11 demands. The most important of all was the demand to abolish the salt tax. Salt was something consumed by the rich and the poor alike, and it was one of the most essential items of food. The tax on salt and the government monopoly over its production, Mahatma Gandhi declared, revealed the most oppressive phase of British rule. If the demands were not fulfilled by 11th of March, the letter stated that the Congress would launch a civil disobedience campaign. Lord Irwin was unwilling to negotiate. So Mahatma Gandhi started his famous Salt March accompanied by 78 of his trusted volunteers. The march was over 240 miles from Gandhiji's Sabarmati Ashram in Gujarat to the coastal town of Dandi. The volunteers worked for 24 days, about 10 miles a day. Thousands came to hear Mahatma Gandhi wherever he stopped, and he told them what he meant by Swaraj and urged them to peacefully defy the British. On 6th April, he reached Dandi and ceremonially violated the salt law, manufacturing salt by boiling sea water. This marked the beginning of the civil disobedience movement. Gandhiji breaking the salt law at Dandi. Worried by the developments, the colonial government began arresting the Congress leaders one by one. This led to violent clashes in many places. When Abdul Ghaffar Khan, a devout disciple of Mahatma Gandhi, was arrested in April 1930, angry crowds demonstrated in the streets of Peshawar facing armored cars and police firing. A month later, when Mahatma Gandhi himself was arrested, industrial workers in Sholapur attacked police stations, municipal buildings, law courts, and railway stations, all structures that symbolized British rule. A frightened government responded with a policy of brutal repression. Peaceful satyagrahis were attacked, women and children were beaten, and about 1 lakh people were arrested. In such a situation, Mahatma Gandhi once again decided to call off the movement and entered into a pact with Lord Irwin on 5th March 1931. By this Gandhi-Irwin Pact, Gandhiji consented to participate in the Round Table Conference in London, and the government agreed to release all the political prisoners. In December 1931, Gandhiji went to London for the conference, but the negotiations broke down and he returned disappointed. Lord Irwin Now we are going to learn how participants saw the movement. Let's now look at the different social groups that participated in the civil disobedience movement. Why did they join the movement? What were their ideals? What did Swaraj mean to them? In the countryside, rich peasant communities like the Patidars of Gujarat and the Jats of Uttar Pradesh were active in the civil disobedience movement. Being producers of commercial crops, they were very hard hit by the trade depression and falling prices. They found it impossible to pay the government's revenue demand, and the refusal of the government to reduce the revenue demand led to widespread resentment. These rich peasants became enthusiastic supporters of the civil disobedience movement, organizing their communities and at times forcing reluctant members to participate in the boycott programs. For them, the fight for Swaraj was a struggle against high revenues. But they were deeply disappointed when the movement was called off in 1931 without the revenue rates being revised. So, when the movement was restarted in 1932, many of them refused to participate. The next group was the poor peasants. The poor peasants were not just interested in the lowering of a revenue demand. Many of them were small tenants cultivating land they had rented from landlords. The small tenants found it difficult to pay their rent. They wanted the unpaid rent to the landlord to be remitted. They joined a variety of radical movements, often led by socialists and communists. Apprehensive of raising issues that might upset the rich peasants and landlords, the Congress was unwilling to support no rent campaign in most places. So, the relationship between the poor peasants and the Congress remained uncertain. The participation of the merchants in the civil disobedience movement. During the First World War, Indian merchants and industrialists had made huge profits and become powerful. Keen on expanding their business, they now reacted against colonial policies that restricted business activities. They wanted protection against imports of foreign goods and a rupee sterling foreign exchange ratio that would discourage imports. To organize business interests, they formed the Indian Industrial and Commercial Congress in 1920 and the Federation of the Indian Chamber of Commerce and Industries in 1920. These merchants were led by prominent industrialists like Purushottam Das Thakur Das and G.D. Birla. They gave financial assistance and refused to buy or sell imported goods. Most businessmen came to see Swaraj as a time when colonial restrictions on business would no longer exist and trade and industry would flourish without constraints. After the failure of the Round Table Conference, business groups were no longer uniformly enthusiastic because they were apprehensive of the spread of the militant activities and worried about prolonged disruption of business as well as of the growing influence of socialism among the younger members of the Congress. Now, women's participation in the civil disobedience movement. During Gandhiji's Salt March, there was a large-scale participation of women. Thousands of women came out of their homes to listen to him. They participated in protest marches, manufactured salt, and picketed foreign cloth and liquor shops. Many went to jail. In urban areas, these women were from high-caste families. In rural areas, they came from rich peasant households. Moved by Gandhiji's call, they began to see service to the nation as a sacred duty of women. Yet, this increased public role did not necessarily mean any radical change the way the position of women was visualized. Gandhiji was convinced that it was the duty of women to look after home and hearth, be good mothers and good wives. And for a long time, the Congress was reluctant to allow women to hold any position of authority within the organization. It was keen only on their symbolic presence.